Springtime is approaching. You want to get out and ride? Let's talk about what you need to do to get your bike ready for the season. Coming up next on Goldwing Docs. I know I've talked about this before, but so many people keep messaging me about that opening and they say, hey, do you know when you twist your throttle, the thing moves? Well, it doesn't do that anymore. You can see I fixed it a long time ago, but I'm still using that same opening, and because I'm using it, people keep messaging me and saying, hey, you know, your throttle quadrant's moving. I fixed it. All right, let's talk about what you need to get your bike ready to go. Now, I know I said it's spring approaching and it's supposed to be getting warmer. Actually, it's freezing in here. I've got my heater going in the garage. It's snowing outside today. I can still see my breath, so not quite bike riding weather yet, but here's hoping. So here's what Honda would have you do to get your bike out of storage. They said, if it's been stored for more than 4 months, change your oil. I'm not sure I'd go with that. If you changed your oil, which you definitely should, before you put your bike away for the winter, then having it sit for 4 months, you really don't need to change the oil again. That's just a waste of good oil, and there's nothing wrong with the oil that you put in there 4 months ago. Now, if it was a year, 2 years, okay, maybe I would do that then, but 4 months or just over the winter time, no. And of course, you did change the oil before you put your bike away for the winter, right? Because you watched our How to Winterize Your Bike video, which I will put a link to down below. You definitely did all the things in that, right? Okay. The next thing Honda says, if it's been more than 2 months since you stored your bike, drain the fuel and fill it with fresh fuel. Okay, well, I know where that's coming from because, especially with today's ethanol fuel, the fuel, it gets old and stale and it separates, you get shellac deposits. Fuel just does not store well. However, because you watched my How to Winterize Your Bike video, you know that you put stabilizer in your fuel before you put the bike away for the winter, right? So your fuel is going to be just fine. Again, if it's been sitting for a year, I'll probably think about draining that fuel and replacing it. But if it's just been over the winter and you put in a decent stabilizer like this one before you put the bike away for the winter, you got no problems. Just go out and ride. And I use this marine stabilizer. I'll put a link to this down in the description below. Not only does it stabilize the fuel, but it off-gasses and coats the inside of your fuel system, your fuel tank, with an oily coating that prevents corrosion of your fuel tank, which is really important in our bikes. All right, next on the Honda list, check battery electrolyte level. Well, if you still have a battery with electrolyte in it, you probably need to ditch that battery and get an AGM battery. Especially on a 1500, you really don't want an old style wet flooded lead cell battery. They just don't have the oomph required by these bikes, and plus they're maintenance hogs. Get a decent AGM battery. I use the MotoBat in here. Again, I'll put a link to that down in the description. That battery is extremely powerful. It will last for years, especially if you put a battery tender on it. Again, link down in the description. I keep a battery tender on this bike 24/7 when it's parked, and as a result, my AGM batteries last 8-9 years. Flooded lead acid batteries, you might get a year or two, and it's $100. It's expensive. So spend an extra $20, get your AGM battery, spend the extra $20 or $30, get a battery tender, and you'll save money in the long run. Okay, next on Honda's list, charge battery. Well, again, you don't need to do that because you have a battery tender like we talked about in the winterizing video, right? You plug that in the bike, let it sit all winter on the battery tender. Again, link down in the description. And because of that, your battery is like new and ready to go. You don't need to charge it. Check the final drive oil. Okay, well, I guess that's kind of like checking your engine oil, but normally you would do that anyway. But if you did it as part of your winter maintenance routine, then you're probably good to go. Otherwise, sure, go ahead, undo that little cap there, just reach in with your finger, make sure the oil level is even with the inside of that hole. And if it's a little low, well, you've got a problem because that system is sealed. That gear oil should not be going anywhere. It should never get low. So if it's low, then you might need to start looking at seeing what seals are leaking, and you will likely have oil on the wheel and perhaps on the brakes, which is not great. I tend to change that gear oil maybe once every 2 years. Actually, typically I will change it every time I change my rear tire, and I never have it low at that point. Anytime I've ever changed that oil, it's always been exactly where it should be. Pre-ride inspection, of course, we're gonna do that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, so that is the Honda list of what you need to do to get your bike ready to go. Now I'm going to talk about what I would recommend to get your bike ready to go in the spring. The first thing I would highly recommend is that you click like on this video and then subscribe and click that little bell, because then you get notifications of all these videos that we post, so you can find out all kinds of stuff about your bike, what you should be doing to it, how you can fix it, how you can maintain it, and of course it's free, so why wouldn't you? Second thing, if you haven't already, go join the Goldwing Docs forum. We've got 90,000 people on there, lots of experts, lots of friendly people who are waiting to help you with any problems you might have or questions about your bike. All right, enough of the plugs. First on my list is clean. I know cleaning is on the list for putting it away for the winter, and as you might be able to tell by the state of my bike, I didn't get to that in my winterization routine. I know, I've done everything else, but I didn't clean it. If you have your bike put away for the winter and it's in a dusty area and it's got, filth on it, then yes, you probably want to clean it again before you take it out. Typically, if you're in an enclosed garage like this, you aren't going to get that much dust. Definitely, I can see I've got dust on my windshield that's collected there since the fall, so I'm definitely going to clean my windshield. But my bike is filthy because I put it away filthy and I didn't clean it, but okay, clean your bike. Check your tires. How often do you check your tires? Every time you go ride your bike, right? Of course, because that's what the manual says to do. And yeah, everybody always checks their tires every time they ride their bike, right? Okay, but this is a good opportunity to have a really good look at your tires. Rotate them through. Check all the tread for any kind of damage, cuts, anything penetrating the tire. Have a look at the sidewall, both sides. Really inspect those tires, because your life depends on those tires and you want them to be in good shape. Check if there's any kind of abnormal wear. It might give you an indication that there's something going on maybe with your suspension or your brakes. So really give your tires a really good once over. Coolant. Okay, now this is something that Goldwings have not so much of a problem with, but it is an issue. When Goldwings get cold, the cooling systems tend to leak a little bit. And sometimes it's the hoses and the fittings, sometimes it's seals and the water pump itself, but you'll typically know because you'll come out on one cold winter day or in the spring and you realize, oh, there's a little drip of green coolant on the ground, and it's usually right in the front, right behind the front tire where the water pump is. And you start panicking, oh my God, my bike's got a leak and it's leaking coolant out, I've got a huge problem. Actually, you probably don't, because once the bike warms up and once the weather warms up, the leak generally goes away. This Goldwing does it, my 1100 did it. So if your bike leaks a drop or two of coolant over the winter, don't panic, it's fine. Check your coolant level before you actually ride the bike, but as long as it's not down and it's not dumping cups and cups of coolant on the ground, you're probably fine. And if you've started riding the bike, it's gotten warm, it's warmer outside, and you're still seeing drops of coolant, okay, then you need to start having a look and seeing where it's coming from and doing something about it at that point. But if you're just seeing it over cold weather, don't worry about it. And I did mention the coolant. Definitely check the coolant level in your bike. Normally you aren't going to lose coolant when you're riding, but it can happen. You can get a little bit of evaporation. You might have a tiny leak somewhere. You might be burning a little bit of coolant if you have a head gasket, a little bit of a leak. You could have seepage from different fittings. So if you are losing a little bit of coolant, top it up. Make sure you're at the correct level. And same thing goes for oil. Are you having a little bit of seepage? If you notice the bottom of your motorcycle is kind of grooey and just a little bit of oil seepage from various seals, not a huge deal. If you're seeing drops of oil on the ground, okay, that's a little more of an issue. But if you just got a little bit of seepage here and there from some older seals, and I mean, our bikes are getting older and the seals are not what they once were, you are going to see just a tiny bit of seepage. Again, not a big deal. Check your oil level, make sure that you haven't lost some over the winter. If you did your oil change like you should in the fall, and then in the springtime you check the oil again and it's down significantly, you really need to figure out where that oil is going. That's a problem. Electrical items. Cold weather and particularly condensation from temperature swings can affect electrical contacts, and so you can have problems that didn't exist in the fall, and in the springtime you find things aren't working. So it's a good idea to check all the electrical stuff that you can. Check your brake lights, check your horn, check your turn signals, front and back. Make sure all the different lights are working. And don't forget the lights on the dashboard. Check the various switches. Make sure your side stand light is turning on and off when you retract the side stand. Same thing goes for the high beam light. Make sure it's turning on and off. Any of the different electrical switches that you can manipulate and check. So pretty much every electrical system that you can with the bike just sitting here, definitely go over and just give it a once over, because again, this is not the kind of thing that you normally check before every ride, so it's a good time to check it now. This is one that I commonly forget myself, but if your bike has air suspension, chances are it's probably going to leak down over the winter, and then your first ride you're going to go out and realize, what's wrong with my bike? It's like slamming over bumps, and it's because you've got no pressure in your suspension system. So if you have air pressure control like this bike does here, just check to make sure the pressures are correct. If not, pump them up to where they should be. If you have, like on mine, where the forks have air pressure adjusted, it's not done through the compressor, you have to do it manually. Just check those pressures and make sure they're correct. Next, you want to check any movable items. You want to check your brake levers, clutch levers, shifters. Now's a good time. You haven't been subjected to the normalization of deviation, so that means something gradually starts to go wrong, and because it's not happening all at once, you kind of get used to it. So now you haven't been subjected to that, so something that's wrong will stand out more. Check all the things that move. Check your steering and brakes and shifter and all that stuff, and see if there's anything that's not quite right. Do you feel binding? Is there corrosion somewhere? Are the cables starting to bind? Hey, if I turn the steering all the one way, is my clutch cable binding up if you have cables on your bike? That sort of thing. So you basically want to just do a front to back check of the bike. Kind of like the T-clocks that they teach you in motorcycle school, but you want to do like a hyper one. So you're doing your MSF course and you're doing your T-clocks check, and they're watching you to test you to make sure you're doing it correctly. So you're going to be super hyper vigilant in everything that you do. So do one of those super hyper vigilant checks. You just want to check your bike front to back and see if there's anything going wrong that you want to check and make sure that you haven't caught otherwise. Rubber is actually porous. Air will leak through it over time, so definitely check the tires are at the correct pressure, especially before you take it off the center stand, because you take a bike off the center stand and a tire is flat, that bike is probably going to fall over on you, and there's not going to be anything you can do about it. Motorcycle tires do not look flat when they're flat. They have stiff sidewalls, so a motorcycle tire that actually has zero air in it can look completely normal when it's up on the center stand, and you won't know that it's gone flat until you put it down off the center stand and the bike falls over. So definitely check it before you take it off the center stand. Electrical connectors. Goldwings have intercom systems with a wire that plugs into your helmet with contacts. They've been out in the weather and rain and environment for a year. Get some decent quality electrical contact cleaner. I like using CRC. I'll put a link to that down in the description below. Just give it a spray in there to clean up any of the contacts in there, both on the bike end and on the helmet end. And speaking of electrical items, relays. The 1500 is packed with relays. There's 7 of them in there. Actually, there's 8, but one of them is a normally closed relay that never fails, but the other 7 definitely do. A number of years ago, I had a couple of relays fail, and when I went to replace them, they were almost $30 a piece. I said, that's ridiculous for a relay. So I actually found a supplier that could supply them to me at a significant discount if I bought them in bulk, and I'm talking thousands at a time. So I started buying these relays thousands at a time and selling them through the Goldwing Docs website, and since then we have sold, I don't even know, it's probably close to 20,000 relays. I say there's a significant percentage of Goldwing GL 1500 motorcycles around the world that have Goldwing Docs relays in them. Because I can buy them in bulk, I can get them at an incredible price, so I turn around and pass the savings on to our Goldwing Docs members. You don't have to be a member to buy them, but it helps. I'll put a link to the relays on our store down below. Now, if you've had one fail, the rest are not far behind. A lot of the time we'll have people buy a full set of 7 relays, or they'll buy 2 or 3, replace the one bad one, and then keep the other 2 in the bike just as a spare, a backup, so that they don't get stranded somewhere if a relay fails, because yes, you can get stranded if the right relay fails. You could lose your headlights, you could lose your engine. So whatever that relay controls, if it fails, your bike is done. So having a couple spare extra relays on hand really helps you out and prevents that from happening. Junk. Get rid of all the stuff that's been collecting in your trunk for the last year. I know I'm terrible for this. I actually tend to do this in the fall, but sometimes I'll leave it to the spring. Well, I'll go into the trunk and just pull all the stuff that just got tossed in there over the last year. Sometimes it's like an archaeological dig. I find stuff in there that I forgot that I threw in there. It's extra weight. You don't need to be carrying that around. Even if you didn't need to clean your bike, give your windshield a nice cleaning. I've used a number of different products over the years, but I've really settled on this Honda spray cleaner and polish. In fact, I use this to clean my entire bike. It's really great stuff. It causes water dispersion, so if you're riding in rain, it kind of disperses the raindrops because it leaves kind of a coating on behind. You don't need to rinse it beforehand. You can just spray this on dirt and bugs and whatever, grease. Let it sit for a few minutes and then just wipe it off like it wasn't even there. I will definitely put a link to this in the description below. And talking about rust, let's talk about the main thing that rusts more than anything else on the bike, and that's you. You haven't ridden in a few months. Don't get on your bike and head out on the highway and go hit some twisties. You gotta remember that motorcycle riding and the skills that it requires are perishable. So if you don't do it all the time, they tend to go away. Yes, there's muscle memory that never goes away, especially when you have done it for years and years of repetitive riding. Some of that will stay with you no matter what. But the nuances of controlling the bike, particularly in emergencies, that tends to go away if you don't use it. Go find yourself a nice open parking lot. Do some panic stops, do some swerves and avoidance maneuvers, stuff that you don't normally do that isn't going to enter into your muscle memory. Go out and do it. Just go get your brain lubricated so that stuff is back in your brain and in the forefront so that if you need to do those emergency maneuvers, they're fresh and you know exactly what it feels like and how to do it and how much braking can you apply before you lock up a wheel, that sort of thing. Go out, find an empty parking lot, knock some of that rust off before you go out on the first ride. And for that first ride, again, you don't want to go out on the twisties. You want to find out if there's a problem in a gentle way. Go around the corner. Feel, is there a wobble? Are you feeling something strange when you go around the corner? Is there some strange kind of vibration that wasn't there before? Go on and check all that stuff, obviously at lower speeds and in a non-technical environment. All right, that's it. That's everything I could think of that I normally do to get my bike ready for riding in the springtime. If you have any other ideas of things that you might suggest or things that you do to your bike, leave a comment down below. If you think I got anything wrong, definitely leave a comment down below. And I encourage you to go check our Goldwing Docs website. Like I said, 90,000 friendly people waiting to say hello. And if you thought this video was useful, please click like, subscribe, and that little bell. It really helps us out when you do that, and you get notified every time we post another one of these videos. Thanks for watching.